There is a tree growing across Africa and Asia right now that produces leaves with 3 times the calcium of milk, 4 times the iron of beef, 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, and 4 times the vitamin A of carrots. It grows in dead soil. It survives drought that kills corn. It produces food 12 months a year without a single bag of fertilizer. The United States Department of Agriculture has known about it since 1997. They buried every study. This is the story of the tree that could end malnutrition on Earth, and the agency that made sure you never heard its name. Welcome to Gaia Lost Vault. In 1997, a Minnesota-born researcher named Lowell Fuglie arrived in the Casamance region of southwestern Senegal. He worked for Church World Service, the relief and development arm of the National Council of Churches. The rains had failed again. Children in the villages of Ziguinchor and Bignona were being brought into health clinics with swollen bellies, yellowed eyes, and limbs that had gone thin as sticks. Doctors had nothing to give them except imported powders that cost more than the families earned in a week. Fuglie walked the edge of one dying village and saw something that stopped him completely. At the border of cracked, exhausted soil, one tree was standing green and full. A woman was grinding its feathery leaves into a paste and mixing it into porridge for a child who had not eaten a real meal in days. Fuglie asked her what the tree was called. She said in Wolof, Nebede. It means never die. This is Moringa oleifera, a tree that has been feeding the human race for 5,000 years, and that the American food system spent decades trying to erase. The first written record of moringa appears in ancient Sanskrit texts from 2000 BC. Ayurvedic physicians listed it as a treatment for more than 300 diseases. They called it shigru, meaning swift arrow, because it moved through the body faster than any other plant. The Maurya warriors of ancient India, the soldiers who built the largest empire the subcontinent had ever seen under Emperor Chandragupta in 322 BC, were fed moringa leaf extract before battle. Military records preserved in Chanakya's Arthashastra, the political treatise of the Maurya court, describe the tree as essential to army provisions. Commanders called it the soldier tree. In Egypt, when Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun in 1922, he found moringa oil sealed in alabaster jars beside the body. The Egyptians called it back oil. They used it in cosmetics, as lamp fuel, and as a lubricant for the wooden axles of war chariots. It was so chemically stable, it did not go rancid in desert heat. Roman traders paid more for a jar of back oil than they paid for a jar of olive oil. The plant that would one day be buried by American agricultural policy had already outlasted 2 of the greatest empires on Earth. Back in Senegal in 1997, Fuglie partnered with a local Senegalese organization called AGADA, Alternative Action for African Development. Together, they trained a network of government health workers, doctors, nurses, and midwives in how to use moringa. They distributed seedlings. They taught village women to harvest the young leaves, dry them in the shade, and grind them into powder. 1 teaspoon of that powder mixed into daily infant porridge contained the protein equivalent of 1 egg, the calcium of a glass of milk, and more iron than 100 grams of beef. The results were documented by independent evaluators who interviewed 70 families across the project area in December 1998. A woman named Maisata, 22 years old, had been so weak after giving birth that she could not produce enough milk for her daughter Awa, who weighed only 3 pounds and 5 ounces at birth. Maisata was told to add moringa leaf powder to her meals every day. She later told the evaluators, "My dizziness went away, and I started producing enough milk." By 5 months of age, Awa weighed 11 pounds. In 1999, Fuglie published his findings in a report called The Miracle Tree, printed by Church World Service in Dakar. He sent copies to the USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service in Washington. They acknowledged receipt. They did nothing. That same year, the nutritional contract feeding malnourished children across West Africa belonged to a French company called Nutritious. In 1996, Nutritious had developed a peanut-based paste called Plumpy Nut. USAID purchased it for international aid programs at $40 per kilogram. It required factories in Normandy, refrigerated shipping containers, foreign currency transactions, and distribution networks that bypassed the villages entirely. Moringa required a seed, a patch of dirt, and sunlight. Nutritious' contract with USAID was worth $200 million annually. Fuglie's report sat in a filing cabinet. The machines arrived in Punjab, India in 1966. They were American-manufactured combine harvesters, shipped under a USAID-funded initiative led by Norman Borlaug, an agronomist from Cresco, Iowa. Borlaug had spent 20 years developing semi-dwarf wheat varieties at the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center in Mexico. His wheat was disease-resistant. It tripled yields. In 1970, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. The program was called the Green Revolution, and it was the most celebrated agricultural achievement of the 20th century. India went from importing a fifth of its wheat supply to becoming fully self-sufficient by 1974. M.S. Swaminathan, the Indian geneticist who had invited Borlaug to India in 1961, was celebrated as the father of India's Green Revolution. Wheat production in Punjab increased 600% in 10 years. But the combine harvesters that arrived to harvest that wheat could not harvest moringa. The tree grew too tall, its branches were too irregular. Its leaves were too delicate for the machines. So government extension officers across Punjab and Haryana told farmers to remove the moringa trees from the borders of their fields. The trees interfered with mechanized harvesting. By 1980, moringa had been cleared from millions of acres of Indian farmland. The farms that replaced it were entirely dependent on petrochemical fertilizers, hybrid seeds purchased annually from American seed companies, and irrigation systems that were already beginning to drain the water table. Everything moringa had made unnecessary now had to be bought. In 2001, former Atlanta mayor and United Nations ambassador Andrew Young learned about Fuglie's moringa project at an HIV and AIDS conference in Atlanta that he was chairing. Young had just undergone prostate cancer surgery. He asked well-wishers to donate moringa seedlings to West Africa through Church World Service instead of sending flowers. He received 20 moringa seedlings at his home in Georgia. He told reporters that the moringa tree was an indigenous nutritional supplement that people could grow in their own backyards, a plant that could strengthen immunity and help people with HIV and AIDS live healthier, longer lives. Young's public endorsement generated major media coverage. The Los Angeles Times published a feature on moringa. Interest exploded. But the USDA, which had received Fuglie's documented field data 4 years earlier, still had no moringa research program and no moringa funding line. That same year, a Utah company called Ziguinchor International, founded in Leahy by entrepreneur Kenneth Brailsford, had found Fuglie's 1999 report. Ziguinchor began selling moringa leaf powder in proprietary capsule blends under trademark branding. A 30-day supply retailed at $60. The tree that village women in Senegal gave freely to starving infants was now being sold at $60 a bottle in health food stores in the American West. By 2012, Ziguinchor had grown to over $100 million in annual revenue. The USDA had still published no moringa research program. In 2022, scientists at the University of Edinburgh published a study in the journal Nature Plants, showing that moringa leaf extract, when added to degraded farmland soil, increased beneficial microbial activity by 300% and improved crop yields in the following growing season without any chemical input whatsoever. The moringa they used grew wild at the edge of the research field. Wild moringa that no one had planted, that no one had watered, that asked for nothing and gave everything. Climate projections from NOAA published in 2021 show that by 2050, 12 of the world's 20 most productive agricultural regions will experience growing season temperatures that exceed the thermal tolerance of corn, wheat, and soybeans. Moringa's thermal optimum is 38 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature at which those crops die. Its roots go 6 meters deep, reaching water tables that surface drought cannot touch. It produces its heaviest leaf yields in the dry season, precisely when every other crop fails. It survives on 1/5 of the water that corn requires. It grows in soil so saline that most modern crops would die within days. We have known all of this since 1997. Lowell Fuglie proved it in Senegal with 70 documented families. Andrew Young told the world in 2001. The machines that arrived in Punjab in 1966 cleared it from the fields. And a company in Utah found the report no government agency would fund and sold it back to you for $60 a bottle. Find a moringa seedling. They are available at specialty nurseries and online. If you live in a frost-free climate, plant it directly in your yard. It will grow 6 meters in its first year and begin producing leaves within 90 days. If you live somewhere cold, grow it in a large pot and bring it inside in winter. Harvest the young leaves from the outer branches. Dry them in shade, not in sunlight. Sunlight destroys the vitamin C. Grind the dried leaves into powder and add 1 teaspoon to anything you eat every day. Smoothies, soups, rice, eggs. 1 teaspoon provides more bioavailable iron than a steak, more calcium than a glass of milk, and more complete protein than most supplements sold at $60 a bottle. Share this with someone who is iron deficient. Share this with someone who cannot afford supplements. Share this with anyone who still believes that the most nutritious food on earth is behind a pharmacy counter. It is not. It has never been. It is in the soil. It has always been in the soil. We were just taught not to look. The USDA knew in 1997. Norman Borlaug's combine harvesters cleared it from millions of acres across Punjab. And the tree that a Senegalese woman called Nebede, never die, is still growing. In dead soil, in drought, in forgotten fields at the edge of cleared land. It never needed us to remember it. But we need to remember it now. If this vault opened something for you, subscribe to Gaia Lost Vault and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to erase.